So today we are going to talk about some tools to help you guys talk to your kids about CCM. And we're just going to start by introducing ourselves. So I'm Darla Clayton. I'm the community relations specialist for the Alliance to Cure Cavernous Malformations. And I have two kids affected with the CCM2 gene, and I'm also affected myself. Um, and then additionally, when I'm in my other life, I'm a clinical psychologist. So I have, training in how to talk to people about stuff, which is why I am on this webinar. And Nicole.
Okay, so I'm Nicole. I am the wife and the mother of people with CCM3. So my husband has it, and my youngest of three children is 9 years old, and she has CCM3. And in my other life, actually, you're in my office right now, I am a counselor. I'm an LPC, and talk with people of all ages about all sorts of things all the time.
Perfect. Thank you, Nicole. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get our slideshow started. Mm -hmm. No, I'm going to have a hard time with it. Hang on. My computer is going to act weird. All right, now I should be able to get to the slideshow. Sorry about that. There it is. Okay. There we go. So we're going to talk about tools for talking to your kids about cavernous malformation. And we're also going to read a new children's book called Biscochito. So can you guys hear my computer making like a bing-a-bing noise?
No,
All
I
right,
can't
good.
hear it.
It just keeps wanting me to add something to it that I don't have. All right, so one of the things that I think it's important, this sort of like 3 words sums up how to talk to your kids. Talk, reassure, and listen. And this is some simple wisdom from the Aluna Network. We're going to give you guys a bunch of resources, and we will have a document at the end of this presentation, and we'll email it out to everybody. So keep an eye for that. You will get that information, so don't worry about frantically writing things down. The other thing is that all of our webinars end up on our YouTube channel, so you can watch it again if you miss something. All right, so talk. It's really important, even if you don't have all the details or give all the details, to talk to your kids. Make sure you're talking to them truthfully and at a developmentally appropriate level. So um, if your kiddo is 3 years old, you're going to tell them different things than you would tell them if they were 10 or 12 or 15. And that actually kind of leads me into a story that I wanted to share with you guys about my son, Trent, who is 20 now. But when he was little, he was 3 years old, and we had just left the hospital. He was there for a bunch of appointments, and we really hadn't told him anything about his CCMs. He'd already had 2 brain surgeries by this point, one when he was 1 and one when he was 2. He didn't really remember either one of them. So he was sitting in the back seat in his car seat. We were driving out of the parking lot, and he said, "Mom, is my brain gonna bleed again?" And I mean, I was really taken aback because we hadn't talked about any of this, but he was listening to all of the conversations we were having with all of the doctors, and he was picking up a lot more than I expected. So at 3 years old, he's asking me, is my brain going to bleed again? And my point in mentioning that is I really didn't think I had to have that conversation. Um, and if I did, I would have had the conversation before he heard all kinds of scary stuff from the doctors, and maybe he wouldn't have been so afraid. So talk to your kids, be truthful, be developmentally appropriate, and start younger than you think you need to. It's really, as long as you're being honest and not using big, scary words, you can have these conversations with little kids. Um, Reassure them their feelings are okay. There are helpers all around. There's hope. and listen, have time to process, hear their feelings without trying to teach, correct, or redirect.
Okay, so that and many of the following slides we wanted you to know are not just things that Darla and I think as professionals and as people affected or having family members affected are important to do, but we actually did a bit of a scan of some empirically based articles from places like the Aluna Network, Mayo Clinic, Harvard, the NHS from Scotland, Mississippi State Extension Services TIPS program, which is a trauma informed parenting and professional strategies program, and a few others. So we scanned all of this and absorbed the information and have tried to summarize the high points for you that are common um, among all of the articles that we read, in addition to our research, I mean, our own personal experience too and professional experience. So there are a couple slides that we have to share about common themes that we found. The first theme was to tell the truth, meaning be straightforward, honest, age appropriate, use simple terms if you're talking with a kid who's earlier developmentally or just with language, and give a sense of hope when appropriate. So Darla touched on that already. Um, she mentioned Trent's story, and I wasn't prepared to necessarily tell a story about Mary Ellen, my daughter, but um, she's 9 now, but she was, I don't know, like about 5, I guess, when she was diagnosed. I should probably know the age. Um, but she has always been super curious too, like Trent. She hears everything. And I was determined that she shouldn't know and she didn't need to know her diagnosis, that it would scare her too much. But she, of course, had to go get MRIs and visit with doctors and things and became curious. And I think had something else in her mind about what was going on that was probably far worse and scarier than the truth. And thankfully, we had a team of providers with a lot of experience that encouraged me to talk with her and let her know in an age appropriate way. And I'm really glad that I did. Even being a professional, like when it's your baby, you just want to protect them, right? And that's totally natural. But it absolutely seems to have been the right choice for us too. So you do want to be straightforward. The previous slide mentioned not going on and on either. So brief, to the point, but truthful. Not euphemisms, not minimizing, but um, but keeping in mind their developmental stage. So, and then the second theme is that children will sense, like I mentioned, what is going on. Their imagination may color the situation a lot worse or more scary than the actual reality. Um, they are doing their best to make sense of information that they don't understand. And so they'll develop a narrative, whether we give one to them or not. So it may be better to think about a narrative that includes hope and reassurance and the helpers, as in addition to the facts, to help them make sense of and put together the information that they are gathering one way or another. And then the third point is not telling them may mean that they're more anxious. So without knowing, they also won't, not only will they be anxious, but they won't have the opportunity to learn the skills that they need to learn from you to manage the information. So if it's just an elephant in the room that's not being discussed, then you're also not discussing, hey, there's this thing that our family needs to support you through, and here are some ways that we can manage it together. They might feel alone.
Yeah, great points, Nicole. So some more common themes that we were finding as we were reading about this topic, talk about the helpers. I think a lot of us probably heard Mr. Rogers tell us that. We're really lucky to have a lot of helpers in our area. So we've got the people at the Alliance, right? And so those are
Yeah.
helpers for our kids. We have really amazing doctors. We have a team of scientists that meet and talk about this. We have lots more scientists beyond that that are working on CCM. We have a lot of helpers, and so it's okay to tell your kids about that. They're probably not going to understand the details of the science unless they're big kids like mine. But and even then they probably won't. But tell them about all of that. Tell them there are people working to make medicines for this disease. And so there is hope out there. Talking about the helpers can give them some hope. There's storybooks, analogies, using visual aids. These things can be really helpful for kids. Um, one of the analogies that I used to use with Trent was he he would be really afraid, and I would tell him, it's okay to be afraid, but you can't live there. So we would say it's okay to be in the mud. You can be in the mud, but you can't live in the mud. So you have to find a way out of it. And how can I help you find a way out of it? Use simple, understandable terms. Don't use, you don't even have to call it a cerebral cavernous malformation. You can just say there's a boo boo in your brain. You don't have to use big, scary terms. Maintain your daily routines. If you have someone who's sick in your family who has a crisis, your routines may shift. If you do have to shift your routines, prepare your kids as much as you can. Even if it happens suddenly, let them know, oh, I'm sorry I wasn't able to pick you up from school today. I was sick, but whatever is going to happen in the future is how it's going to get handled if that happens again. So definitely talk to your kids if routines are going to change and maintain them as much as you can because there's safety in routines for kids.
Mhm. Yes. And then, okay, so Claire McCarthy, um, from Harvard Health Publishing wrote a great article. Oh, yes. And so I will make sure to send that link to you, Darla, to put on our list. Um, she's also a PCP at Boston Children's Hospital and professor of pediatrics at Harvard. So she made a list of steps and fleshed them out in an article that I thought were fantastic and worth sharing. I mean, it may look a little bit simple on the page, but in practice, we recognize this is harder than it seems. But the first is just to think about your child's developmental stage. And that may be easy for us to say as clinicians, but there are lots of places, and maybe we can add some to the list too, where you can read about child development and what's sort of appropriate and expected at certain ages and stages, which is also then affected by things like brain issues like CCM, but also things like learning disorders or other concerns that your child might have. So you really need to think uniquely about your child. But we can give you some resources about basic developmental stages, and then you think about your child, him or herself. Where are they and what are they capable of understanding and taking in? Um, and then second, talk first with your parenting partner. So if you have a co-parent or if you have a parent in the home or grandparents that are helping raise your children, you want to make sure that you guys have a discussion about how to approach this conversation. If you have the luxury of planning the conversation, you don't always have that luxury, which Darla and I were discussing before we came on. But if you do have a plan for a conversation, be on the same page and understand how you're going to approach this together. And then three, find a time when you can sit for a long time and give your child undivided attention. Again, if you have a planned conversation, plan on lots of space and time in case they need it. However, your child may need a very brief interaction and do sort of like microdose the conversation, if you will, like very brief little bits of information as they're curious and tolerating the topic, and then you can come back to it. And sometimes they'll guide you with their questions and concerns. However, it is good if you do have that luxury of time to plan a good chunk of time because you wouldn't really want to say, oh gosh, we have to continue this later when you're right in the middle of something so important. Um, and then four, keep it simple and straightforward. You've heard that already. And then five, be truthful. Six, don't hide your own feelings. You don't want to make your child feel responsible for your emotions. So, like breaking down in front of them and letting them fix it for you or take care of you is not really what we're expressing here. But if you look like, oh, I'm fine and I have a smile on my face and this is totally okay and it's not scary, and then you're telling your child about something that feels scary to them, they're actually looking at your face and hearing your voice to judge how they're supposed to feel about the information that you're providing to them. So if you are inauthentic, they can feel that for one. And you being inauthentic and looking too okay might actually be a bit invalidating to them, and confusing for them. So it's okay to say, yeah, this is scary, just like Darla was saying earlier. And then seven, talk about the helpers. Um, Once again, that theme comes up among all the authors that whose articles we scanned. But yeah, Mr. Rogers said it well. And when my kids are even watching the news, if there's something negative that shows up on the news, I ask them to look for who the helpers are, and they'll go, "Oh yeah, they're the firemen, or they're the policemen, or there's that kind person that stopped to help," right? Those things matter because it says to your children that the world is a safe place and their needs will get met.
Absolutely. Play, and listen to the themes. Play is so important. I think most of us understand that our kids are learning through play. It's a lot more is going on while they're playing than just play. Play gives kids opportunities to name and express thoughts and feelings in a less threatening way and in a less personal way. It's they can take those feelings and put them onto a doll or something else, and then it makes it a lot easier to talk about them sometimes.
Yeah,
And play gives adults a chance to hear themes of struggles and strength and to build up those strengths and teach them new skills through play. So sit down with your kids, sit on the floor, get some toys and play with them. You'll be surprised what you learn from those
yeah.
interactions.
Okay, so empathy. What is it? Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another person. It involves recognizing and validating the emotions of others. Empathy helps create a supportive and understanding environment for kids. I'll let Darla read the next slide too to flesh it out and comment on it as well. But empathy does not come natural to everyone. And sometimes it's even more difficult when you're stressed, and focused on your own pain to really feel the experience of another person. So it's something that I think we as parents really have to be very intentional and thoughtful about.
Yeah, great points, Nicole. We really wanted to talk about empathy because when you're having these conversations with your kids, you're gonna want to pull in some of these empathetic tools. And so again, like Nicole was saying, it's not natural for everyone, but it's good to think about it so that you can bring those in when time comes.
Yeah.
So how can it help? What's the point? Empathy helps build trust and connection with kids, and it allows us to more effectively provide support and comfort. So when you're having those conversations and you're responding in an empathetic way, they feel a lot more supported, a lot more heard, and a lot more understood. Empathy helps build bridges and find solutions because when we understand what's going on, then we can help figure out how to fix it or at least support it better. So we have to understand before we can build those bridges and find the solutions. It encourages stronger bonds with your kids. So this is great for talking about CCM, but empathy is a great thing to pull in regularly anytime you're talking to your kids about hard stuff. It can lead to improved communication and it can really improve emotional resilience, which honestly I think is it's important for everyone, but it's especially important for our kids in the rare disease community to build that emotional resilience.
Mhm. So, how to use it when talking to kids? Active listening. So, this is essentially when you're giving your full attention when the child is talking. Um, and active listening involves more than just hearing words. It involves hearing what's behind the words. And really, I think I use the term a lot, like being an emotion investigator, being really skilled, as skilled as you can be at listening, um, for any of the cues that your child's giving you about what they're feeling behind their words. And then nonverbal cues. Use body language to show that you're engaged. You're obviously going to want to make eye contact. Nodding can be helpful, smiling, mirroring what emotions they're expressing with your own affect. Um, and then reflecting feelings. So you want to repeat or acknowledge their emotions. And that can be tricky because you can say, okay, so you're sad. Okay, you're sad. Or you can say, oh, yeah, I hear you saying that you're sad. I wonder if you feel a little bit scared too, based on a few other things you said. And you can sort of pull forth, if you're really skilled at doing this, you can pull forth a little bit more emotion expression and help them name or label their emotions in a way that even they didn't expect. And we know from Dan Siegel's research that naming emotions tame them. And you felt it before too. So when someone, a good friend or family member or a therapist, really gets it and they name it with you, you kind of have this experience of like, like you feel settled and seen and heard and understood. And that whole experience is really kind of soothing, just to feel seen. And then you can ask open-ended questions. You want to encourage them to express themselves. Um, so if you ask question, what open-ended means is not yes or no, right? So do you feel sad about that? Yes, that's a closed-ended question. But an open-ended question would be, tell me more about what you're feeling. What are you noticing? And that allows them to be a bit more narrative and descriptive about their experience. Um, and then avoid judgment. Don't criticize and don't dismiss their feelings. You absolutely don't want to give them the impression, either directly or indirectly, that there's something wrong with how they're feeling or responding. And then I think be curious. So, respectful curiosity goes a long way. And it sounds a bit more like, wow, I wonder what that's like for you than it does, oh, you must feel blank. So be curious in a very respectful way. You may think that you know what's going on with your child, but maybe you don't. And you want to give them a space to share the parts that you haven't thought of or been aware of to that point.
Yeah, nicely said, Nicole. So we're just going to go through a few empathetic phrases that you can pull in when you're having these conversations, because sometimes having the words readily available make it a lot easier to remember to use them. So things like, it's okay to be upset. Let's talk about it. You're not alone. I'm here for you. It seems like this is really scary, hard, sad. It's really helpful for me to hear your thoughts. I like this one. It seems like, I think that goes back to what Nicole was talking about being curious. And I don't personally like to say, oh, I can tell you're really scared, because then I'm putting that emotion onto them, and that might not be what the words that they would use to describe it. So I try to use words that encourage them to say like,
Mhm.
yeah, I am feeling a little scared, or really I'm feeling sad, or whatever. So it seems like, or I wonder if, those sorts of words still allow some space for the child to say, yeah, I'm not really. I'm kind of feeling more like this.
Yeah,
Um, Tell me what's going on. This doesn't feel fair, does it? It looks like you're upset or scared. It's okay to feel sad when things are hard. So just giving them the space to feel their feelings and helping them name those feelings, all of that can be really helpful when we're having these conversations with kids.
all right. So empathy don'ts. Um, don't tell a child how they feel. Darla just illustrated that really well with some of her examples. You don't want to tell them how they feel, which also involves not assuming that you know, right? And then don't judge or shame a child for how they feel, and don't invalidate. Um, invalidate is a word that I use a lot. I'm not sure that it's in everybody's everyday vocabulary, if you're not a therapist or a psychologist, but invalidate can be in like concrete language, like, no, that's not true. That would be an invalidating statement, right? Like, you don't feel scared, you feel this. Um, but invalidation can also look like something a bit more subtle. So if your child says, I feel really nervous about this surgery that we're about to go travel for. And I'm scared to tell you that because I'm afraid that I'll disappoint you. Something complex like that. You could respond by going, "Oh no, you wouldn't. Why would you think that? You wouldn't disappoint me." And that seems innocent enough. However, you've just invalidated their emotional experience a little bit. So even better would be, "Oh my goodness, I can imagine feeling that way. But I want to tell you, mommy would never be disappointed in you." You know what I mean? So it can be really subtle. And I know that we've all experienced it. No one wants to feel invalidated, but these are some really big, important conversations. And we want to continue to invite the energy of sharing from our children. And that happens when they feel free to say and express whatever they're feeling.
Yeah, great points, Nicole. I also think it's really easy. Something that I feel like a lot of us do, and I know I do it. I'm guilty of it too. Our children say like, "I'm scared," and we say, "You're fine. You're
Yeah.
fine." Or they say, "I'm like the example Nicole gave. I'm really anxious about this surgery." There's no reason to be anxious. That's
Hmm.
absolutely invalidating. And the response, just the easy, empathetic response of,
Hmm.
"Yeah, I can understand. It can be scary. Do you want to talk about it?"
Yeah.
Um, is it's going to make them feel so much more validated compared to, "Oh no, you're fine," which is easy, right? Because we're scared. And so
Hmm.
sometimes when we're having these conversations, we're feeling a certain way about it. And so we don't want to have a conversation that brings up our same feelings with our kids. It's difficult to do. So definitely you have to work at not invalidating.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of other things that we can do, a lot of things, a lot of supports that we can pull in to help our kids have these conversations and talk about hard stuff. In the realm of art and literature and drama and other creative things, there's lots of stuff out there. Um, you know, Even helping a child using some creativity, like, let's pretend we're going to go into the MRI and let's listen to the noises. And you can pull up the noises an MRI makes on YouTube, play them so your kid's not scared the first time they hear them and they know what to expect. And let's lay down and pretend you're in the machine and this is what's going to happen, sort of like improving it or doing like a little drama about it.
Hmm.
Kids can benefit from using art to tell how they're feeling, or sorry about that. um, Reading books about the illness can help kids explore their thoughts and feelings in a way that can feel really safe to them. And the same thing with drawing and painting. It's a safe way to express themselves. And it's a way to express themselves that might not be might feel outside of themselves.
Hmm.
So if I draw a picture about something, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's about me. We as parents can look at that picture and think like, "Oh, my child is telling me that they're feeling scared with this picture,"
Yeah.
but they can draw it and not use the words, "I'm feeling really scared." Um, there's some books out in the world, and we're gonna give you guys some lists with these books on them. But books like Big Tree is Sick, Daddy's Old Robe, and How Do You Care for a Very Sick Bear are some examples of books that the MSU's TIPS program recommends. And we are going to unveil an amazing book tonight. So we have a new book to recommend. And what better way to consider a child's perspective as he or she learns through stories than to listen to one? We're going to hear Biscochito tonight. This is the amazing Biscochito, um, which was told by a couple of our patients and written by Aditi Cantapuli. I hope I said that right. And it was told by Colton Arnett and Atiana Tenorio. And hopefully I said that right also. So, Biscochito has been a labor of love. It is a really lovely story um, that was written about CCM and learning about the illness. so that we can share this with children. And it will be available. It is not available to purchase right now. It will be available on a donation basis shortly. So I'm going to go ahead and read it to you. Today is quite special, and Mateo can't wait, for time with his Nana is always so great. What are we making? Said Mateo with cheer. We're making some biscochitos, Mateo, my dear. You may try just one, Nana said with a smile, but first we must play with the dough for a while. Play with the dough? Why, whatever for? Said Mateo, who simply wanted one more. We need to make shapes, unique and surprising. You'll see what I mean when the biscochitos start rising. These shapes have a story, like you and like me. The first one we make will look like a tree. The tree, like our family, started out small, a seed in the soil and not very tall. As roots took their place and started to grow, so did our family, and wouldn't you know, this beautiful tree sprouted with life. Branches and leaves and mamas and papas, tias and tios and primas unknown, they're all there to remind you you're never alone. Now, trees, like our family, can carry a trait that makes them quite special and awesomely great. And our family genes from our family tree may carry this trait from to you and to me. Sometimes this trait can make you feel ill or tired, like after climbing a hill. And sometimes this trait's not so easy to spot. No symptoms, no signals, not even a dot. But on this tree, you'll find your own place. Out on a limb, you'll have your own space. And always remember, your family is home, rooted in love and wonderfully grown. The next biscochito you see is shaped like a heart, and like the old tree, plays an interesting part. One day when I wasn't feeling so well, your mom took my hand, as she could tell. Something was wrong, but she didn't fear. She stayed by my side until the doctor was near. They did a few tests, checked me over with care, and all the while she sat with me there. Now, one of these tests, called an MRI, felt like a spaceship way up in the sky. The next test they did was an EEG. They put a bunch of wires on me. They stayed on my head with a sticky like paste, a paste that holds all the wires in place. They measure the action inside of your brain, surprisingly so without any pain. And with the results, the doctors decide a plan to take as our guide. Now, my doctor reported the good news. You're healthy enough to leave when you choose. And so we went home, lively and well, so full of love, with stories to tell. Beginning so small, but growing so wide, love makes you feel all fuzzy inside. And when love is patient, and when love is kind, a love with no end is what you will find. A heart-shaped biscochito is a wonderful way to show us the role that love has to play. The last biscochito brings our safety to mind, a helmet with sprinkles, the yummiest kind. And just as you would while riding a bike or wandering along while taking a hike, we must remember that safety is key, and I think your friends would agree. Being outside is always so fun, the breeze in our face and our face to the sun. The sun with its light can help make us well by giving us hope and a story to tell. You see, sweet Mateo, sometimes life is tough. We may never quite understand all the stuff. So keep moving forward and keep pressing in. Nana, said Mateo, these shapes are so cool. I can't wait to share these stories at school. And speaking of sharing, can we make some more? Like one or two, or perhaps even four? Of course, said Nana. Sharing is fun. Te quiero, Mateo. my special grandson. That was Biscochito. I'm just going to leave this slide up for a minute and then I will pull it down, but we're going to do some Q&A. If you guys have questions or specific scenarios you want to run by, we can chat about some stuff. Nicole and I are not able to provide therapy, but we can certainly answer questions. So we will do that. And I just wanted to remind you that we have support group right after the webinar. I already put the link in the chat, but I will put it again. And then I did put the QR code here. So if you plan to come to support group and you want to grab the QR code, grab it now, because I'm going to stop sharing in about a minute. Let's check the Q&A. Do you guys have any questions? One of the things I was thinking about as I was reading Biscochito was how they're making cookies with helmets, which seems a little unusual, but it provides an opportunity to talk about what can we do. And for me, I find when I'm talking about CCM with adults, knowing that there are things that can be done is powerful. So, you know, talking to kids, what can you do? You can wear a helmet to protect your head. You can do things to avoid tripping. You can try to eat an emulsifier-free diet, which is complicated, but certainly talking to your kids about eating CCM healthy food, all of those sorts of things gives them something that they can do to help. What can I do to help if grandma is sick? You can talk to her, you can give her hugs, giving them things that they can do to give them some control, some agency. So that can be really powerful. I'm just looking through the chat. Farzan, I think you're asking about the link to the support group, which is shared already, but I'm going to share it again.
It's at the top.
It's at the top. I'm sharing it again.
Ride your bike on a beautiful sunny day for vitamin D.
Yes, vitamin D is important.
Soy de México y no sé hablar inglés. Is there a translation in the works, Darla?
So we will for the webinar, we will transcribe it and then you can translate it with the Google Translate.
Okay.
So that's typically what we do, and we're happy to send that transcript to anybody who needs it.
Okay.
All right. So if you guys have questions, putting them in the Q&A rather than the chat is really helpful. So we have a very cute and very authentic New Mexico story. The shapes and the home design is accurate. You wish you knew how to make them. Well, guess what? The recipe is going to be in the back of the book. So you can make some biscochitos. This person has a cavernoma and their children and grandchildren are aware and help them when they need it. And they're grateful for the help of the Alliance. We're grateful for you too. It's always, it's really nice to be with our community. We have such a phenomenal community. It's nice to know that we have each other to support.
Indeed. I'm wondering if I can translate that. There's a comment, Darla. Maybe we can make note of the name. Yeah, so the story I thought was so sweet too. And one of the things that I noticed whenever I read the story was just the connection, you know, the mention of family and togetherness and generations of people coming together, you know.
Yes.
Oh, someone said she's asking if there's an option. Okay, yes, yeah.
All right. So someone is asking, what are the good foods
Hmm.
that you mentioned for CCM? So we talk a lot about CCM healthy foods, and typically that means foods that don't have emulsifiers or like junky additives added to them. The easiest way to do that is whole foods, like eating chicken rather than processed chicken nuggets, or eating broccoli rather than, some kind of broccoli cheese weirdness situation. Um, so just eating actual food is the easiest way, but there are also tons of things that you can buy that are clean, emulsifier free, healthy foods, um, that you can find. And we have a couple of resources to help with that. We have an app. There is an app that exists called the Fig app, Food is Good. And we've partnered with them and created a CCM healthy diet. And so you can scan foods at the grocery store and it will tell you if it falls within um, the realm of CCM appropriate or it doesn't. We have the foods kind of labeled, or the ingredients labeled red, yellow, and green. So green is a-okay, yellow is, be careful, and red is something you probably want to avoid. Um, so that is the answer to what is CCM healthy food. There's some really interesting research about the gut microbiome, which I'm not going to get into too much here because it's not relevant to our topic, but feel free to send me an email if you have some questions about that. I'm happy to talk about um, food and dietary stuff in CCM. My email is darla@alliancetocure.org, and I'll also put that in the chat. Someone is saying they can translate to Spanish. Oh, thank you
Yeah.
so much. All right. This person's son has a CCM and is now on disability. His daughter lives with them, and also has the gene. She seems to deal with it okay, but how do I bring that up? Great, great question. Nicole, do you want to
I
take
was
that?
looking to read that. Was it in the chat?
It was in the Q&A. So
Oh, in the Q&A. Okay.
the,
Um, okay. The
the
ambulance.
question is how to bring up um, the fact that the child is affected with the CCM gene.
How old is the child?
They didn't
Didn't
say.
say. Okay. And so how to bring it up with the child was the question?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, wow. So again, like those steps on the slide, and maybe we can include some of those in our resource that we send out. The steps on the slide that had like 1 through 7 are a great place to start, honestly. So you need to think about how old is the child, what is their language ability, what they might be able to understand that you have to offer first, right? Um, and then I think some good guidance, in my words, that's sort of summarized in the presentation and the articles too, is to be very simple and direct in your first introduction. So as you bring it up, you really don't want to like go on some long um what's the word I'm looking for? Like a very long tirade about it, but instead just bring it up in simple terms. Like, hey, you've got, if it's a kid who is old enough to hear it this way, you've got um, something called CCM, and you can define it in really simple terms, like that it's a lesion in your brain, and it may cause some problems like headaches and things, whatever the kid may be dealing with would be good to name, and just sort of like simply define it and wait on a response, right? So you want to talk and then hear what they're saying and look at their nonverbals and their body language and see what comes and let that guide you. So you share something very simple that's age appropriate, listen to their response. And more often than not, the child will ask some questions or offer a statement that is really your cue as to what to do next. So it's a very individualized approach. Does that make sense to you, Darla?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I believe she shared down here that the child is 11.
Oh, yeah.
And you're wondering about addressing
Yeah.
the more serious stuff. You know,
Yeah.
it's complicated. And one of the things that I feel like with my own kids, I don't, I tell them what they need to know in the moment, right? So,
Yeah.
what's, I want them to know that this exists and that they have it because I don't want them to find out in a really scary way. But also, you know, if my daughter, for instance, hadn't already watched her brother have surgery, I don't know that I would tell her that the only treatment is surgery because that's really scary. Um, However, if they needed to have surgery, then we would be having a more in-depth conversation. So I think really it's jumping in with what they need to
Hmm.
know.
And also, this came up for me last night with my 11-year-old. So it's funny, like, to share a tidbit of my personal experience. My 9-year-old daughter hasn't had to have surgery yet for her brain, but she also has a tethered spinal cord. And we just learned about it through all of the follow-up and monitoring for her CCM, right? We did a spine MRI and found this out. So I have 11-year-old twins, and one of my 11-year-olds on a drive with just the two of us last night said she had heard us talking about Mary Ellen having surgery in November. And she was asking me all sorts of questions like, where is it? Is it a really big incision? Is it going to hurt her? Like, she had so many questions. And I really let her questions guide me at 11. It's such a strange age. Like us adults view 11-year-olds as little tiny things still. But really, developmentally, they're starting to question a lot. And they're starting to have their own ideas and thoughts and feelings. And they've probably Googled a lot and read things that we don't even know that they've begun to understand. Like, they are capable of hearing a lot typically. Now, again, you have to think about your own 11-year-old child you're referring to and what they can handle emotionally and socially and language-wise. But with my little one, it was just like, okay, in the car, I didn't expect to have the conversation, completely spontaneous, and it was question driven. So I answered her questions as simply as I could. And then at some point I said, "Do you want to know more detail?" And she goes, "No." And I said, "Okay, well, if you have questions later, let me know." So she had enough. I think essentially what came out of it for me is she wanted to know, is she going to be safe? Is she going to die? My 11-year-old happens to have a lot of anxiety. So she literally wondered, like, does this mean she's going to die? Um, and how long are you going to be gone? She
yeah,
wanted to know when mom was going to be back.
good questions. Of course they want to know those things.
Yep.
Um, I'll just share, I think in this case of this 11-year-old we're talking about, so when my daughter, when they found her lesions for the first time, we had her cord blood tested, so we've known her whole life that she had the genes, but she didn't have any lesions that we were aware of until she was probably 10 or 11.
Hmm.
And um, when she found out about them, I think knowing that her brother had had a lot of problems was extra scary. So I think in this case, this dad has had a lot of medical problems and he is, sounds like he's having a lot of issues with disability. And so, for this little girl, knowing that she has the same thing as her dad and seeing how her dad is currently functioning, that might be extra scary, and I kind of feel like that's
Hmm.
what grandma is asking us here.
Yeah.
So my what I said to my daughter was, there's lots of different ways that this disease can affect people, and in my case, I had the luxury of explaining that I also have the disease and I don't have a lot of symptoms. And her grandfather had the disease and he didn't have a lot of symptoms. So, and her aunt. And so I was able to kind of go through our family and say, like, all of these people have it, and I know your brother has been really sick with it, and that's
Hmm.
scary, but all of these other folks in our family, they also have it, and they're doing pretty good. So, I feel like in my daughter's case, that helped ease her anxiety a little bit.
Yep.
So I hope that was helpful. All right, we have two more questions, which I think is probably all we have time for because support group is supposed to start at 8. So this question is about teenagers. This mom finds it difficult to reach her teenagers. She's informed them in great detail. They've been visiting at the hospital. They saw the ambulance pick mom up. They've asked, mom has asked how they feel and if they want to sit down and talk, and that they can ask if they have questions or if they would rather talk to a counselor, but none of them want to. Hmm.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah. I
yeah,
feel like
teenagers are
teenagers are
hard.
tricky. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
they're hard.
And one of the
Um,
things that I found is writing. I don't know, Darla, you have teenagers. I don't, but like with my teenage clients, sometimes I'll give them a homework assignment to do a circle journal with a family. And it's kind of like you as the mama could write down, hey, I'm a little concerned about you not wanting to talk, and I wanted to invite you when you feel ready, you can write me back and tell me what you're feeling and leave it on their nightstand, or pass it to them. And then when they feel ready, they could write something down if they want to. And every time I've assigned this, it's happened. So, also texting is sometimes safer, and they can express things via text that are hard for them to say in a vulnerable way face to face. But I don't know. This is a non-teenager mom talking, but
but
what do
those
you
are
think,
great.
Darla?
Those are really great ideas. I also think sometimes they don't need to talk.
Yeah,
You gave them the information, they're feeling okay about it.
yeah.
Teenagers tend to be kind of self-centered. And so I don't mean that in a mean way, but that's just where their brains are.
Developmentally. Yeah,
Exactly. So they might just be like, okay, I know what's up, and that's all the information I need. They don't want to talk about it anymore.
yeah.
The other thing I thought might be helpful is maybe watching the documentary
Hmm.
Eloquent with them if they're old enough, and I think that they are in your case. So just sitting down and saying, like, we're going to watch this documentary together, and then, you know,
Yeah.
talking about it afterwards, not maybe um, pushing the conversation, just being like, oh, what did you think? And,
Hmm.
I don't know if you can get your teenagers to sit down and watch a 40-minute documentary with you, but you never know. It might be worth a shot.
What's great about that suggestion too is sometimes for teens, mom is not the expert and they don't want to hear it from you.
Mm,
But the documentary is like another person almost talking with them about it.
yeah, that's a great point. And there's so one of the people featured in the documentary is my son, and I think he was 18 or 19 at that time. So
Yeah.
if there's someone kind of closer to their own age that
Hmm.
might be relevant to them. All right. So we have one more question regarding emulsifiers. Cellulose seems to be in most vitamins. It is okay to get those in small amounts. Um, Cellulose is iffy. So typically we say, first of all, the whole thing is dose dependent, right? So um, eating a little tiny bit every now and then is probably not going to destroy your gut lining. Um, However, we just trying your best to avoid it is ideal. It's particularly a problem. It's a problem for all CCM patients, but particularly for folks with CCM3, they have to be extra careful because their gut is already struggling to produce a proper gut lining. But for the rest of us, being really, really careful to just avoid where you can. And if your magnesium or whatever it is you take has some cellulose in it, and that's the only one you can find, I personally wouldn't make myself, um, you know, bananas trying to figure out how to get a cellulose free one. Although they do exist, and we can help you find one if you want to shoot me an email. I can do some looking for you. All right. That was our last question. I'm just gonna see if there's anything in the Q&A that needs to be touched on. Um, all right, so there's a few links in the Q&A, so if anybody still needs those, I'm gonna leave the meeting open so you can grab them. And also the link to support group is in the Q&A. I'm gonna drop it one more time. That is not it. That's the microbiome link. Grab it up here and drop it. And so let us just say goodbye. Thank you guys so much for coming. And of course, huge thank you to Nicole for taking time out of what I know is an incredibly busy schedule with Lots of kids and lots of things you have on your plate and work, and we really appreciate you taking the time to come and hang out with us tonight. Um,
Oh, thank you. And thank you for always taking the time out.
you.
You have
All
such a genuine way of supporting all of us. Thanks, Darla.
right, I'm gonna go ahead